Welcome to Conversations with Big Rich. This is an interview-style podcast. These interviewed are all involved in the off-road industry. Being involved, like all of my guests are, is a lifestyle, not just a job. I talk to past, present, and future legends, as well as business owners, employees, media, and land use warriors. Men and women who have found their way into this exciting and addictive lifestyle we call off-road. We discuss their personal history, struggles, successes, and reboots. We dive into what drives them to stay active in off-road. We all hope to shed some light on how to find a path into this world that we live and love and call off-road.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Have you seen 4Low magazine yet? 4Low magazine is a high-quality, well-written, four-wheel drive-focused magazine for the enthusiast market. If you still love the idea of a printed magazine, something to save and read at any time, 4Low is the magazine for you. 4Low cannot be found in stores, but you can have it delivered to your home or place of business. Visit 4lowmagazine.com to order your subscription today. On this episode of Conversations with Big Rich, I will be talking with Jody Everding. Jody was an early rock crawling competitor. He spotted and drove in all of the classes of We Rock. Jody's been a friend for a long time. We've had a few arguments about things, and that's going to happen between promoters and spotters, especially protecting their drivers, you know? Think Kyle Brusso, okay? Think Jody Everding. That happens. So anyway, Jody, thank you so much for coming on board and being part of Conversations with Big Rich and talking about your history.
My pleasure. Well, I'm honored to be here.
Well, we'll see how that goes after this.
Yeah.
I probably should make a statement that this may be a mature audience.
No may be required. No maybe.
No, maybe. It will be, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So anybody that's got their kids listening, time to put the kids out of the room. Anyway.
There may be an F-bomb or two. I'm sure they'll slip.
That's all right. It happens. So, Jody, the first easy question. Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in National City. National City is a subsidiary of San Diego.
Okay.
I grew up there. I'm single mom, right? So I grew up there, but I grew up in some other places. I jumped around from family to family a little bit. I stayed with an aunt and uncle. Moved around a little bit as a kid, but generally I did elementary school in National City, junior high school in Chula Vista, and into high school, and then I dropped out and went to work pouring concrete at about, I think I was 15 years old. In the summertime, one of my punk rock buddies that I was rolling around with as a punk rocker kid said, "What are you doing this summer?" And I thought I was going to hang out and smoke a bunch of weed. And I said, "Just hang out and smoke weed." And he's like, "Well, why don't you come work on our concrete crew with us?" And my dad, and I'm like, "Well, let's check it out." So I went over there and I got hired on over a couple other yahoos. And it was like $5 an hour cash or some shit. And that's what I did all summer. And then come summertime was over, go back to school. There were some issues with my mom and the welfare check and no school clothes or something, and so I just went back to work. And I stayed at work doing that for a number of years until the next recession come along or something, and then I went off to Gallivanting doing some other bullshit.
So what kind of, while you were in school, what kind of student were you?
I was a terrible student. I started smoking weed in grade school, and all through junior high school, I was the stoner kid, hanging out in the middle of the field, poor grades, riding my bike to and from school, never doing my homework, shit like that.
Understood. The were there any interests that you had besides getting stoned and punk rock?
Girls. Yeah. I never played any sports or football. I mean, I played the little flag football in the field with the, after school kids, the rec center, for a little while. But I was always the last kid picked. My neighborhood was all, Asians and Samoans and black kids and stuff, and they were all really much better at football than I was. But kind of one of the reasons why I never got into it. I didn't really fit in over there.
Right. So what did you have any outside interests besides riding your bike? I mean, was it BMX or?
Yeah, it was a BMX bike.
Okay.
It was in the early, my first BMX bike was like a Royce Union. I don't even know if you've ever heard of those, but put on layaway at Gemco.
Right.
Finally got it, and it was some weird color, and I rattle can sprayed it another weird color, and I don't know, metal flake gold polish or something.
So then when you, I guess so, there's not a whole lot we can pull out of school. Did you end up spending a lot of time in detention? Were you like one of the, the Breakfast Club?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, we call it opportunity class.
Opportunity class. There you go.
Yeah, is where you got there at regular time, and you stayed in. You didn't get to go out for the breaks with the rest of the kids or students. You stayed in your room. It was just a couple doors down from the nurse's office and the counselor's office and shit. And then you got out early. They dropped you like, I don't know, 30 minutes after lunch break or something. They sent you home. And yeah, because they just omitted all the break time and shit like that. And I was in trouble there too. It didn't last long. We got booted. Me and my punk rock buddy, who I call my brother now, Jim Bob. We went to a school dance or something, and they put on some punk rock music. We called them a slam pit back then before mosh was the thing. And we started a little pit with a couple other Mexican punk rocker guys, and I don't know, somebody got plopped in the nose or something, and we all got suspended. And that was the last hoorah for school. We all stayed on the job after that and went to real punk rock shows with our $200 that we got paid on Friday. We were paid on Friday, went and hopped on the trolley downtown to the punk rock shows, and broke on Saturday night. Beer and punk rock stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's quite a bit of drugs in my story back then. Running around, a 15-year-old kid running around downtown and stomping around in punk rock boots with a mohawk and shit.
Is that when the tattoos started?
Yeah, I think I got my first tattoo at 17 years old in Orange County. I was in a VW bus with my girlfriend at the time and 4 of her friends. It's actually when I learned how to drive a stick shift. We jumped in Alicia's bus and headed for San Francisco.
Okay.
And we caught scabies on the way. We came back after, I don't know, we were hustling. We went to San Francisco. We saw some of the sights. We ran into some people. some other punk rock familiar type people that got their car impounded somewhere around Chinatown, where it was like a hot spot to go check out with some punk rock stores and shit like that. And then they needed some help, and they were robbing Vons and shit and grocery stores and returning like bottles of Tylenol to get money to raise ducats to get their car out or something. Some malarkey. Crazy kid stuff.
Right. Did you ever make it to San Francisco?
Yeah.
Okay.
We never had the money to go to like Alcatraz or anything, but we bummed it around downtown and went to a punk rock show or some shit, and got some more drugs.
Not in San Francisco.
Yeah.
I grew up just south of there. I spent a lot of time in San Francisco.
Yeah. It's really not that great of a place. I mean, it might be if you're a baller and you can go to all the fancy stuff, but being broke, being in San Francisco, we went to the wharf and walked around down there and, saw some of the popular sites and shit like that. But it was mostly just a kid adventure trying to get out. You don't know what we were running from. We were just off doing shit. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have, your cameras were like a little box thing.
Little
Click.
110 Instamatics. Yep.
Yeah. Some crazy. I think there might even been a Polaroid involved.
Polaroids are pretty cool.
Yeah. Where you take the picture and it pops out and develops itself. Yeah, it was kind of cool.
So you pretty much worked concrete most of your life then, right?
I still work concrete.
Yes.
Yeah, most of my life. That's pretty much what it's all been. Lots of ups and downs from there. There's been, construction workers aren't exactly the cream of the crop either. It's mostly where the derelicts end up. The guys that have broken home or broken opportunity or starting over, can't find anything better. They gotta work hard, get their money. Right. Yeah.
So you were you said that the recession, I would imagine that kind of put a hamper on the construction activity. Were you what did you do during that time?
Just caused a lot of trouble. I freeloaded. I couch hopped a few times. I was moving around. Basically just hustling on the street to make a buck, or doing a little something here and there, pick up little odd jobs in between. I wasn't much of a recycler like a lot of folks did. We were just running around hustling.
Okay.
Squeaking by, broke, work a little here, work a little there. And not that I saved my money very well, but make enough quick enough to have a little bit in my pocket for a while.
So what was the first car that you owned?
My very first car was a 1963 Plymouth Valiant.
There you go.
With a slant six and a push button automatic.
That's a real styling car right there. That's a total chick getter there.
No, it was not. But at my age, it was
freedom.
16. I didn't have my driver's license yet, but we piled in all my cronies, and went and cruised around. And I soon lost that car and got a couple of tickets. Got my license suspended until I was 18.
Knowing you, that probably didn't slow you down, though.
No, not really. I drove, I had I had a girlfriend that had a Volkswagen Bug, and I drove her car all over the place without a license forever. I drove the work truck We had a 64 Ford pickup, manual trans, flatbed that was the work truck, that hauled all the material and carried the tools and shit. And I drove that just out of necessity, no license. You don't fit the profile in your work truck, kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
Except on Friday evenings, at about 6 or 7 o'clock when they set up the DUI checkpoints.
Yeah.
If you got a rack on your truck.
Yeah, it was a rack. It was a flatbed with a welded on rack.
Yep.
Yeah. But being a, punk, skinny little kid, which they used to call me Wormy went back then.
Wormy.
Yeah, because they thought I had worms because I'd eat everything on the planet and still weighed $140.
Wormy. I could just see Jody Everding as Wormy.
Yeah. That was my Uncle Tom coined me that. That's
awesome. Next time I see you, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, you go.
So then you work in concrete, you're, just making ends meet. Was there a time when things started to turn around for you?
Yeah. So let's see, we're jamming forward probably 10 years.
Okay.
From 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 was derelict punk rocker hustling. A few years after that, 24, 25, 26, I did some time in county jail, in and out of jail a little bit. Drugs were getting the better of me. When I kind of around 25, 26, the county got involved and said, hey, look, mister. Well, the judge told me, he's all, you're going to do this drug program and get cleaned up, or I'm going to send you to the penitentiary for your priors, for your charges. And I'm like, oh, man, I've seen a lot of guys in my neighborhood end up in the penitentiary and end up with that state number.
Right.
That they really couldn't get out of. They'd get out of the prison and get on parole, but within a year's time, they'd violate somehow and end up back in violation for there's like a year. So, and then they'd get wrapped up in that whole system and you wouldn't see them anymore. So I was trying to avoid getting that state number. So I complied with what the judge told me. I went to some programs and started getting sober and learning how to do that. Going to some AA and NA and kicking the drugs, kicking the alcohol and shit like that. And that was about the time I met my first wife, Sarah, right before I got into trouble and when I started going to jail and some shit like that. And then kind of got cleaned up and got straight. And then when I got out of one particular program, Sarah had finished some stuff at home and moved out and got a place for me to come out of the program too. And we had a house together and I went back to working. Working was picking up. I was working full blast. Had a new young girl. She was working full blast and we started, working together as a team. And my head had kind of popped out of my ass as opposed to being a drug addict, derelict, and, just starting to take off and get more aligned with life. And we moved from our place in North Park down to a place in Imperial Beach where I had a backyard and a driveway and a little garage, a little single car garage. And around there, after a while, when I got my first off-roader. Sarah's folks were big into off-road. They were in a South Bay 4x4s. Sarah grew up around off-road. Her dad and her uncles were off-roaders. You know, they had some random wheelers, like your dad had a CJ7 and a Ford F-150 short bed, you know, some big tires on it. And some other folks around all had random four-wheel drives and shit. And they had a little club going. So she grew up doing that stuff. And I had seen some of it, and my old man, or who I call my old man, which is really my buddy's dad, Joe, I call him Pops. He's been into drag racing since he was a kid, so he's a big gearhead. He can fix anything, essentially. He rebuilds motors, small motors, motorcycles, boats, you know, anything really that has nuts and bolts on it, he can pretty much do. And in the time when I was not working, recessions and whatnot, time off, we'd redone a few trucks and, you know, rear end swapping, gear changes. You know, I've ripped a drive line out of the work truck or two, and out of necessity, and just being a young kid hanging around with a bunch of guys that are gearheads, you pick up on doing shit. You know, you're helping, you're pulling a drive line, you're changing tires, you're washing and waxing, you're just around cars,
Right.
motorcycle, boats. You go fishing, take the boat out, which we're in San Diego. You know, I own a couple of boats, and you know, we've tuna fished and bluefin and lobster catching, and you know, done quite a bit of fishing on the ocean. You kind of learn how to work on trailers. You work on, you know, pumps and hoses, plumbing systems. You learn a lot of crap, right, from hanging around with gearheads.
Right.
So we moved into the place in Imperial Beach, and I was looking for an opportunity to get into the desert, and I found my first CJ in around 1999, 2000, somewhere. And it was a salvage titled CJ7. You've seen it. I competed in it.
Okay.
I bought that out of the wrecking yard for $2,800. And when I drove it home and pulled it up in the front yard, Sarah cried when I pulled up in front of the house. She just cried. She's like, "Oh my God, I spent our savings, $2,800 on a CJ that had a bent frame, and it was a junker, but it had a Dana 300 in it, T5. It was on 33s. It's perfect. You know, it's kind of red with orange stripes on it, and Renegade. You know, and that's kind of where the whole thing started. And she looked at me and she was like, "How are you gonna buy parts? Off-roading is expensive." I says, "I'm gonna become famous. I'm gonna get some sponsors to pay for it. I'm gonna compete in this thing." And it was just a quick response to try and calm her down and keep her from crying. I was just gonna figure it out as we went along.
Isn't it suck when women cry?
Yeah.
That's our weak spot, or at least it is for me.
It is for me also. It is. So that went on for a little bit, and you know, her whole man, you know, shot me down some basics about not wheeling alone. You know, gotta have a jack, which I savvied all that shit already. You know, my own man's got property in Montana, and when I first started pouring concrete, he took me up to do some bow hunting as a bonus to the ranch in Montana. And you know, when you hunt, he's got a pickup truck that has Detroit lockers in it. You know, you got to lock the hubs. It's got a locker in the front. It's got, you know, manual transfer case, compound low, granny gear for crawling and shit. So there was some exposure to forestry roads and ruts and hill climbs in the 4-wheel drive at the time. So it was kind of like something that I kind of dug, just kind of like gravitated towards. And same with when I got that CJ, I just started driving it everywhere I could, you know.
Did you when you bought it, did you know about rock crawling competitions at that time? Were you
Not
exposed to
really.
that?
No, not
Okay.
really. So I wasn't exposed to rock crawling competitions or really much other than trail wheeling, like jeeping and off-roading with not just exclusive Jeeps like Jeepers do, you know, the Jeep Club. But that's where my father-in-law at the time is like, you should get into a 4-wheel drive club, you know, because you're going to find more like-minded peeps. So we started going to, obviously, Tierra del Sol is the biggest club in San Diego. You know, they have TDS. You know, we went to those kind of events and stuff. But I ran into, they were gray hairs at the time.
Right.
A lot of old timers. And I was looking for a little bit younger crowd. I found that in the San Diego 4-wheelers, and that's kind of where I made my home as far as off-roading goes. So here comes the ripple effect. If you have, I jumped into that Jeep thinking, no, this is going to be cheap. This is going to be my one project. Well, to have a Jeep to go to the desert, there's either a pickup truck to drag it. You can drive to the desert, tent camp, if that's what your boat was that you wanted to flow. But, along came the first camper, back of the truck, a trailer, and then into a motorhome and a shower, and all that ripple effect. You spend, $30,000 supporting your $2,800 Jeep. It just.
And in the meantime, Sarah's still crying because
because
there's no savings.
Well, the money got better
Right.
for a while. The money got better at work and life was getting better. We were, shit was getting more credit cards and more flexibility with going to the desert and a newfound passion, kind of, new fun. In that club, that's where all the spotting came from. We'd go out to our local OHV out here is Corral Canyon. And there's a few trails up there. We'd take a bunch of stock Jeeps through. New folks in the club, you'd get all kinds of weird new people around. And you'd spot all these stalkers through stuff that you don't want to drive in the stock trail all the time. You want to get them. You drive a little something that's a little bit more aligned with your skill set, or,
Right.
As you're wanting to grow, you want a little bit of a challenge. So you're kind of pressing that envelope all the time, but you always got the one stalker guy that shows up, the new guy, and you drag them through and you get them through, and they'll go, all right, they had the time of their life, and you're like, man, I'm lucky we got that thing through there. Can't believe it. But that's where my spotting stuff come. I was trail boss for a while. I'd take 30 rigs through some of those trails, and Sarah would move the Jeep up, and, started doing that. And then, I don't know, through that club, I met Ed Webster,
Right.
He was in that club. Ed Webster's Becca's dad, and Dustin's father-in-law. There's an off-road shop in El Cajon, Jeff Shekel Off-Road, JSA, where we'd get a lot of our parts. He did a lot of builds in the East County. And through him, I met Dustin and Becca. And we were Dustin was building the Red Bull Jeep. And I'd been wheeling 2 years maybe. with the club and getting into building my own CJ, and had ambitions of competing that, because by the time I started wheeling regular, I got exposed to the rock crawling events, a little bit of it. You see the pictures in the magazines and stuff. And somehow I ended up helping Dustin build that CJ in part. I'd spend a few nights at the shop putting that thing together and work on it for a big crunch. And he had a competition somewhere. I can't remember where it was. I think I didn't go to the first one, maybe I went to the first one. But the first one I actually went to was one of your events. I think it was at Lions Pride.
Lions Pride in Lucerne Valley, yes.
Yes, sir. That was my very first rock crawling event. I saw Chris Durham there, which was a big deal for me. He was bombing hit that Jeep of his with the aluminum tub through
the J10. Yep.
Yeah, and broke it. And that was my first exposure to a competition there. I don't even think I participated. I think I drug my Jeep up there and never even unloaded it, because I was helping Dustin do his stuff, and I had intentions of competing in it, but I just petered out. I never got there. And so that was my first event, and then I can't remember what happened after that. I don't even remember if I spotted Dustin then in that event. I don't recall who his spotter was then.
I don't either. I don't remember who his spotter was. I was wondering if it was possibly you, but I don't remember.
It was possibly me, but I don't remember.
Okay.
It's been a long time ago.
Yes.
And I think that's how that's through that channel. That's how I ended up spotting for Dustin. Just showing up and working on the car and being there, and ended up spotting for him. But there was, he had some other irons in the fire at the time, so it wasn't really settled all the way, but it eventually ground into that. And it worked out kind of all right for a while. I mean, who wouldn't be seduced by the Red Bull brand,
Especially back then, for sure.
Yeah, back then it was a huge deal. And that shiny, those, at the time it wasn't Aqualoo, it was JP Off-Road was the manufacturer, the supplier of them aluminum tubs, which was some guy named Dave Knight.
Yeah. Who
remember that guy?
Oh, I remember Dave. Dave was one of my first. In fact, he was probably my first true sponsor.
Wowzer! Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of people that'd like to find him.
Yeah, right. Well, I got my first tub from him.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think I got it some slash price somehow. I don't remember, some sort of a deal I got on it. I was stoked to have it. But I was still running my Z frame on my CJ at the time, which it had like a 2-inch kink or a inch kink just in front of the rear spring mounts, like where the motor frame rails come out. Just in front of the front springs, it had a little kink over, and then a bunch of booger welds holding it together. And somewhere around there, I did a frame off and put a different frame underneath of it, plated it all up, new motor mount, moved the motor to the YJ side diff, and went from a built 30 to a Dana 60, somewhere in there, in my own rig.
Right.
And because I think it was because the 44 in the Red Bull Jeep was breaking all the time, blowing up those hubs like crazy.
Yeah, the whole hub and hub fuses.
Yeah, and it was a lot of axle breaking in the 44. and the CTMs were there. That's how I'd met up with Jack, was through Jack was at TDS and was rendezvousing with the Red Bull crew and some of us, and Dustin had to go off and, you know, had network, we'll call it network, with the Red Bull thing, and I ended up on the trail with Jack and got in a ditch somewhere. Somebody got stuck, and Jack and I were underneath the truck shoveling out a bunch of sand. You know how the muddy it is at TDS.
Right.
And that was our first interaction together. I met Jack on that trip. And then, you know, I was not bashful. I've never been too bashful. So, hey, how about some of them U-joints for my Dana 30?
Working that sponsorship.
You bet, always. And he's like, yeah, I can get you a pair, and he got me a pair of U-joints. And then, you know, just a lot of spotting. We ran a lot of events. We did with Dustin. I spotted quite a bit. All the We Rock events. He was doing a Pro Rock series. Did all of those, spotting there. It wasn't long. Trying to remember. It's just kind of, sorry for the jumping around.
No, it's
been
all
a
good.
while since I've dug all this old stuff up. I only spotted for the Jeep for a little. It seemed short-lived. And he was jumping around with different spotters or whatnot. But then when he got the Walker Evans truck, that's when I came on, I think, full time, or became his spotter at that point.
Was that the S10 or was that the Blazer?
Yeah, it was the S10.
Okay.
Rear steered pro class or unlimited class.
Right.
Truck. It was one of the ones from Cedars, dark blue. He called it the Red Bull Rocket, I think.
Right.
And it was a Walker's truck. I still have a bunch of. I had a bunch of those components, some Walker Evans components on my CJ, because I bought up a bunch of that shit when he swapped out sponsorship stuff. Something. He got some Rock Crusher sponsorship or something and swapped out a bunch of parts on his front end, and I gobbled up those takeoff parts and put them on mine. So, and then it was, that's when I met Bob Rogie, I believe, when the Rocker or the Rocket came into the picture. And Bob was helping develop. He was helping Dustin develop the team or managing, or I don't know what. He was offering some advice to Dustin on the phone, or I don't know what. They had some deal. Dustin broke an ankle or something and sent Bob as the driver and me off to a location I can't remember the name of in Cedar City. It was the first location, not Cedar City, in St. George, Utah.
Okay.
It was that one off to the...
Where the airport is now, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. No, it was... The airport is on the south side of the freeway, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we were on the north side of the freeway up behind the car dealer.
Okay.
There was some location on like a...
That Snow Canyon area. Yeah.
Yeah, a big bluff. Like we were all at the base of it, and there was a big bluff and a bunch of obstacles on the bluff and up above, I think. So me and Bob met up over there, stayed in a hotel room together, and then Bob crammed himself in that tiny little truck, which I was offset because I wanted to be the driver. I was a spotter. Why didn't you just put me in there? But I stayed on the spotter thing, and Bob drove, and I don't know, we did all right until we broke something at the end. Something. Lots of competitions.
Right.
Bob was great. Loved the death out of Bob Rogie. He did a lot of work for you for a long time.
Yes, he did. He was the original course designers.
Yeah.
Yep.
Over at Cougar Buttes. I might have met him over there, but you know, when I was a spotter with Dustin, I didn't get to socialize. Nobody talks to the new spotter guy. You're like second class citizen, low level, you know, flunky kind of guy. You know.
Oh, the life of a spotter.
Yeah.
Always to blame if something goes wrong. Nobody talks to you.
Nobody talks to you. Nobody remembers your name. You know, they cheer you a little bit when you pick up a heavy boulder. That's all you get.
So when was the first time that you drove your Jeep?
In competition was at a pro rock event.
Okay.
Dustin's schedule. This is probably 2004, the beginning of the 2004 season. We were doing rock, traveling quite a bit, and he was kind of growing in momentum with the team, with her and him rock crawling together. And we were traveling a little bit more. I was getting flown in more often. And then he dropped Bob's event. And it left a little, you know, because it was staggered in between your event and the U-Rock events and whatnot. And it just opened up an opportunity for me to go drive my rig, you know, in schedule-wise.
Right.
And so I grabbed a buddy of mine, Rick, from the club to spot for me. And we went and did some events at Cougar Buttes. And we were finishing last for almost the entire season. I think it was 3 events I competed in. I had leaf springs on it, and I was replacing the leaf springs every event because the Dana 60 in the front was just bending the shit out of them. And they were Pro Comp leaf springs. You know, I've had a relationship with Pro Comp for forever. And that was again through Jeff Shekel at JSA Offroad, who ended up being a shyster anyway. He got in trouble for
I wasn't going to say that out loud, but yes.
Yeah. You know, he's still my friend. He calls me on the regular.
I get a call from him like once every 5 years. Yeah.
He's a great guy. Unless you're getting some work done on your Jeep and you want to get it back. Yeah. He had some issues for a little while, but all that's behind him now.
That's good to hear.
I'm sorry, where was I?
You were competing Bending Springs.
Yeah. And so I had enough relationship with Bob that around my 3rd competition of losing, I mean finishing like 5th to last at Pro Rock, Bob linked my Jeep for me at his old shop in Placerville behind the muffler shop.
Yep.
I drug it up there to Bob's. I had some Fox Air shocks, the early models, the skinny ones, the 2-inch. And he 3-linked it, front and rear. And I took it out to the 4th competition at Cougar Buttes for Pro Rock and went from 5th to 1st place once we linked the Jeep. And then I brought it back and said, I don't like the 3-link in the rear. I want a 4-link. And Bob was giving me a bunch of grief. Oh, first place isn't good enough for Jody. He wants a 4-link in the rear. So he swapped it. He made it a 4-link. And we went and started, we did some trails up there on the Rubicon, which is some of my exposure to the Rubicon. I think it might have been snowing, something. But my adventures up in the Sac area in Northern Cal started with those trips up to visit with Bob, because we'd work on the bug or on the CJ for a bit and then go wheel it. Bob would be in a rental or something and go up and do some trail, and you learn the golden rules of the Rubicon, and that is a case of beer per man per day, never trust a fart, and you don't lose your old lady, you just lose your turn.
Yes, and those rules still kind of apply, except most of the beer is drunk in camp now.
Sure. There was quite a few. I drank out of the Maniac's boot. I'd done a winter run or 2 of them. First one, I thought I was going to die.
From exposure?
I slept in a borrowed Carhartt overall, full Carhartt suit, a borrowed one, next to the fire in the snow. Freezing my fucking ass off. But it was crazy. Bob and I rolled up in a borrowed buggy to the first winter run, and we showed up to the Pirates event, and it was crazy. Everybody gathered around the car, and you could look around to all the familiar faces. Hey, what's up? Everybody's hugging you. Hey, what's up? High-fiving, shaking hands and shit. And there was a 6-pack of gallon tequila bottles, and you could see them being passed along above everybody's head, coming towards where was the cab of the buggy as we're climbing out of the car. There was just booze, chainsaws, giant logs in the fire. It's a good time.
That tequila is the antifreeze.
I was still sober then. So you see all this drinking and all that going on, and you're just like, what the fuck? Crazy.
That's why you froze. You didn't have any of the antifreeze in you.
Yeah, I didn't have any antifreeze. It wasn't until somewhere around 2005 when I started drinking again. But the influences were there.
Right.
So...
Well, that's what the competitions seemed to be, was, it was, you compete real hard during the day, party at night, and then compete the next morning, trying to shake the cobwebs. Yeah.
Well, it was before, it was an unfair advantage for me, and me being a dope fiend, I took it to advantage because I would always show up to the comps. Once I started competing against Dan and Bob, I made it a rule to bring a bottle of rum, a gallon of rum, and a gallon of tequila with me to every comp site. And I'd run in there, and they'd be there all early. I'd pull in, and I'd, hey, bro, what's up? And I'd dump 2 gallons of booze on Dan and Bob. And Dan is still pissed off at me about this, I think. Dan doesn't love me anymore. I don't think he likes me. Every time I see him, he's a little quiet, and he just don't like me no more, I guess. But yeah, I would drop some booze on them boys, and it was serious because they were good, right?
Yeah.
And that little bit of a hangover helps me sometimes. Buckets were closer to the level.
That's some funny stuff.
Jeff Mello was pissed off. He's all, because right around that time where I got the buggy linked, I started drinking. And Mello was like, man, you were worse. You got better. You started drinking. You can rock crawl now. So he always correlated that with being drunk. You know, you were worse when you were sober, you sucked. So it was a thing for a minute.
So then, how long did you? I remember you built a buggy. Did you have Christine,
Yeah, yes.
the killer car?
Yeah, so when we were leaving out a lot of insight there. So in that time, you know, from the end of 04 to 05, I came into We Rock. You know, we had, I don't know what happened with Dustin, but I started, you know, winning. And around that time, I don't remember if that's when I left, but I left Dustin spotting wise. I gathered enough momentum through 04. You know, I PRP was kind of a local company. I had met him at a swap meet in El Cajon at a drive-in that's no longer there. I met Aaron Wedekine over there, and I approached him for some seats, and he has some other guys that he gave some seats to prior recently, but said he didn't really see anything from them, but he could do me some seats for cost. And I think I paid him like $240 or something for some seats, and we made them real loud. We made them orange and leopard skin.
I remember those. Yep.
Yeah, and then I competed at CRCA, which was Jeff Knoll first rock race kind of thing at the Wooden Nickel in Menifee. And there was a rock mound with some, you know, a couple of climbs up in it, up and around, and a U-turn and back over and a big drop or something in the fastest time. And I drove my CJ in that. And I didn't win by any means, but in the end I won because the photographer the reporter for the local paper was there when I'm doing that drop off and snapped a picture of my CJ with the new seats and the big PRP in the hood, which just so happened to be Aaron's local paper. So you know, I do that thing. I didn't even know about the picture. I did that event. We didn't do very well, but it was an event that we did. And a few days later, I get this envelope in the mail with the front page of the newspaper, of a manila envelope, and my check back for the seats that I had bought. So that was kind of like the start of my PRP gig.
Yeah, I know you were really pushing PRP seats there for a long time.
Well, he was giving me all them free seats and helped me out huge. He was my first kind of monetary sponsor. I mean, ProComp was helping me with tires and entrance fees, and Jack was on the car for CTM. You got axles and U-joints, and PRP was seats and helped me out with some hotel. I think he was paying me. In 05 was a big changer for me. We went from last place in 04, where we were finishing 5th and 6th, way in the back, and then in 05, 05 was the year I got the championship in the Western Series win for you. I think it was.
And who was spotting? Who was spotting for you then?
Rick didn't last long. I got Jack to spot for me. Jack from CTM was my spotter.
Right.
Rick, I fired Rick unjustly when I got Jack as a spotter. Jack said he would do it, and I just dumped Rick like a cold turd, just like that. Boom. Which is kind of unfair of me, but Jack was a better spotter, and I was aiming for the top, and that just happened.
Jack could move some rock. He's strong.
The big boy. Yeah. And he was easy to work with. He'd see things your way, or he wouldn't see things your way. And he was decisive, and that was a good thing.
Right.
So
I remember when he tried to get me drunk on margaritas after an event up in Goldendale.
Nice.
And that didn't work so well for him.
He got drunk.
Yes.
Perfect.
He was trying to match me drink for drink.
Yeah, and he drank him under the table.
Yep, that time.
That's good. See, that was 05 was an amazing year for us. We had our biggest spurts of growth. We had the biggest amount of momentum. The CJ got an aluminum tub. It got the Bass Boat Orange, which was it brought a lot of attention.
Right.
It was a little bit of what I'd learned from the time with Dustin about looking like $1 million, you can get $1 million. You know what I mean?
Right.
Good presentation, a little bit more schmoozing, knowing how to talk to some folks, knowing the value. I spent a lot of time on the phone with, a lot of competitors. In the off time, we'd be middle of the week, we'd be talking about what we're working on and shit, and sharing our sponsorship deals, trying to create. Not necessarily Cody, I didn't spend much time talking to on the phone, but Jeff Mello, I spent a lot of time on the phone with, and a few other guys, and trying to create like a standard, like an estimated amount of product or monetary assistance for like a 4x12 bumper sticker on the side of the Jeep.
Right.
And trying to have some kind of standard, because the stock mod class was the one that sold all the Jeep parts, but it wasn't really the one that was carrying the most sponsors.
Right.
It seemed like the Unlimited class always, that was the show. The Unlimited class was the show, and the Pro modders looked more like of a show, and the stock modders were just kind of the other ones running over there on the baby rocks. Right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a little bit of a battle to get, you had to get your momentum, get your wings, and grow up over there, and then move in. And then that's when PRP helped me buy Christine, the bubblegum hood car.
Right.
God, I don't want to talk about that era. That was a nightmare. That was a cool car. It'd have been cooler if it was rear steer, because then it might have just ran off and done circles.
Instead of just run off.
Instead of just run off. Yeah. Were you at that U-Rock event when it took off?
And got into that's the one that got into Creighton's. Yep.
Yeah, crashed into the back of his trailer. I think I paid him $500 or something for the chrome flashing that went over the lift tube.
Right.
Yeah. I miss Creighton. It's too bad about him.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I just was at his service, and it was amazing to see how many people showed up.
That's great.
Yeah.
Sorry I wasn't there, but wasn't in the stars for me.
Right. So, Christine, where did that car come from?
Triple X traction car. Toby something or another. Toby, I can't remember the guy's last name. Toby. Yeah, it's slipping me. I'm sorry. It's been a long time. But Triple X traction was the branding for that guy's shop, I think, in up in Gig Harbor somewhere where those guys were at. Remember those guys?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Those guys off-road. Yeah, it was up by them. And Winchline, I think, was up in that neighborhood too. Winchline.com. Can't remember that fella's name either. They were some of the first synthetic rope dudes.
Right.
Yeah. Which turned out to be an awesome deal. I love the winch line, synthetic winch line now. All of it. Ever since we replaced that cable, it was just something. Still makes me smile. Revolutionized the sport.
Yes. So then, Christine was quite the car. It had its own. Anybody that has never seen the movie Christine, it's about a kid that gets this car and he builds it up, and the car comes to life, and kind of an extension of his mental capacity to extract revenge on people that have harassed him. But Christine took it to a different level.
It was like evil entity demon in the car that manifested anger of the owner onto people around it and ran them over and smashed them horrific way. And then miraculously rebuilt itself so the car looked sparkling new after every murder.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch that movie again just to reminisce. Unfortunately, the rock car didn't miraculously fix itself.
No.
It didn't crash. You know, that was a great idea with that car, other than even straddling the transmission. So it was a single seater, small cab. As soon as we bought it, Jack and I struck a deal with them guys on like a Thursday. PRP cut me a check Friday afternoon for half of it. I think we were buying that car for close to 20, or maybe I can't remember. Maybe Aaron gave me $5,000, and he cut me a check for it. Jack and I hopped in my Dodge with the flatbed trailer and hauled ass from San Diego all the way up to Gig Harbor in a day. We loaded that car we test drove it in some abandoned field somewhere up there in Washington. And then we drug it home. I think we might have stopped in Portland and stayed the night and then drove the rest of the way in. Picked it up the next morning, brought it back home in the weekend. And then, there was the 3-inch headroom rule. We went from, we left out the whole helmet conversation that you and I had.
Oh, we're going to get into that.
Okay. There was a 3-inch headspace rule. And so Jack and I did an experiment. We added some room to the roof. But when we did that on that car, we took some pipes together and we MIG welded it, we stick welded it, and then we TIG welded these 3 joints and we smashed them in a press. And I think the MIG weld held the best. So we MIG welded an added halo in that car to buy me more headroom. I remember doing that at a shop. We did some work on that halo, and then we took off and we started running that car. And it had some fuel. It had a rear radiator. It had heating issues. It was a Vortec V6 to a Power Glide, which I sold that Power Glide for a wonderful amount of money. I delivered it to a fella in Chokecherry and sold him that transmission. It was built by Rusty Bray, that transmission was.
Right.
I sold it to Carl. Oh, the name is slipping my mind. He's a competitor. We rock. Not Hildebrand, no. oh gosh darn, I can't remember. Nice fella from back east a little bit. He had a car when I was running with Justin Kyleman, and we were in Chokecherry, and I got a call right before I left the house about, can you stop in Phoenix to pick up a transmission from Hughes? And they told me what kind of transmission was, and I was going to have like a layover, like a 10-hour layover or something in Phoenix waiting on this transmission. I said, well, I got one in the back.
It was Carl Shortridge.
That's it. It's Carl Shortridge.
Okay.
And so I pulled that transmission out from underneath the bench, and it said, it's a good tranny. And I brought it with me, and I sold it to him at that event. He put it in, he ran it, competed, and then paid me. So it was good. It was Christine lives in Carl Shortridge's car now.
So from you having Christine, who did it go to after you?
Well, so we competed in that car a little while, and it was a learning curve, and I wasn't doing that well. But I did nail some really good stuff. So we had that car at SEMA for the outdoor rock crawling event. I don't think it was the first one, but it was one of the earlier ones where we had the big Matterhorn wall climb and stuff, and it was right there, right out front in the parking lot where they, so the picture was taken. I was competing. We were competing at nighttime. I flopped it onto its side. It was a square door panel, bonk, and it laid down on its side on top of like this rise on a hump. And I had to put it in reverse to get it to go forward. So it flopped over, bumped, and laid down, and Jack just kind of panicked. And I look at Jack, and he's 10 feet out in front of me, and 5 feet behind him is that galvanized rail that they divide the crowd with, the barrier there. And behind that is Chip Foose. So I'm laying there on the side at nighttime, looking at Jack, and stepping the gas, and it won't go forward. And I look, and there's Chip Foose looking at me. He got a big smile on his face, and there's a photographer standing next to him. And I really didn't pay no mind to the photographer. And so I put it in reverse, and the reverse, the way the car was on its side, the reverse actually made the tire go forward, and it drove me forward out of that mess and righted the car. And so I didn't get it back, but I was able to drive through in reverse. It made the way the tires were, just the traction side was on the opposite side. It made the car go forward, and it rolled out. Well, after that competition, the SEMA started or whatever, and I'm there to meet up with Aaron Wedeking again, and we're walking around, and by that time I have a little bit more notoriety. Pro Comp had come in a little bit more with me. I'd been badgering them about banners and stuff, and there were some big banners inside of SEMA with my picture on them, with the Pro Comp tire, my buggy, some stuff. Remember we competed in was it Firebird Raceway in Phoenix?
Right.
We had some man-made courses over there, and I had a photographer take some pictures out there. And I ended up in a couple of ads with that buggy. And I walk in the door, I meet up with Aaron, walking into the main thing, going to the booth or something, and he hands me the SEMA Daily, which is a newspaper they put out at the SEMA show with, the goings on and the meetings and the parties and the whatnot, and a bunch of advertisements and stuff. And on the front page was my dumbass, my face, my bubblegum hood, Christine, the fancy Pro Comp wheels, the tires, the PRP seats across the front page again. So Aaron was stoked. PRP seats, front page of the SEMA show, daily paper, magazine thing. So I ended up with it was a good year. I had 10 or 12 of those, and I brought them home, and I had the whole magazine framed in some fancy frames, and I give them to all the major contributors of the team. And so that was a good feather in our hat. Plus Sarah and I did a Rocks Racing Connection paper
Right.
for a while. Every 2 events, we would write a couple of page letter of what has been going on with us, whether it be, a trail ride or a competition. Every couple of weekends, we'd put out a little letter, and it would come out. It would go out on a Sunday. So when our partners would come in on Monday morning, they'd have an email with a story and a bunch of pictures, and that got us a lot. Putting in that extra time. People are like, "Oh, I wonder whatever happened to that sponsor money I gave Jody Everding," and then bam, 2 weeks later on a Monday, bam, there's a paper with, "This is what we did last 2 weeks." That was a huge help for us sponsor-wise. I got a lot of feedback on that. Man, I love the stories. They just love that connection, keeping them.
Absolutely. They want
to know where their money's going, but
right.
they also want to feel like they're a part of it. Right. So as much as you can bring them in, I think it helps a bunch. It helps the personable side of it.
Right.
The friend, just the bringing them in the inner circle, it helps a bunch. It's tremendous help for us. We got a lot of help.
So what did Christine? That car lived on and went on after you went to.
Yeah. So Christine, stay focused on that again. I'm sorry, I got.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay. So we moved into, the man-made courses were becoming popular for a bit.
Yes.
So we were at a UROC event in Rocky Mountain Raceway, Salt Lake City. I competed there before. Christine didn't like them wall climbs either, them real high wall climbs. She was a low belly single seater with the axles pushed out far out in front of the motor, and same in the rear. That it was kind of a long car, but low, right? Similar to, I don't know if you looked at it, Justin Kyleman's car, kind of, but a little narrower.
Right.
But it seemed low and long, right? Well, she didn't hill climb very good. She didn't go up them walls very, very good at all. I neutral dropped that thing, and I just couldn't get it over the top of them hills. But we were man-made course, Rocky Mountain Raceway. I flopped it over on its side. There was a bunch of folks helping us get it righted. She was kind of leaning on the side of a hill. It had no neutral safety switch. And I moved the shifter, what looked like it was in neutral, started the car, and the throttle was pinned from when she rolled over. It bent a bracket on something, an arm on top of that Vortec D6 to where the throttle was stuck. And it neutral dropped out from inside this group, bounced off a bunch of man-made obstacles and turned right. It went down and hit a K-rail. It jumped over the first K-rail, past some, I think it was on the drag strip by that time, and went through these 2 bleachers. And I remember I was chasing that car over to the K-rail. I'm running behind it because I knew there was a kill switch on it, and I was after the kill switch, hoping that it would stop on something long enough for me to catch it and kill it. And as it went over the first K-rail between these 2 sets of bleachers that were like on the edge of the drag strip, there's like this 4-year-old, 5-year-old little blonde girl sitting on the corner of these bleachers that the car had just ripped through. And here I am at a full sprint running after the car, and I look over onto the corner that it missed this little girl by like, I don't know, 6 feet. Ripping through the middle of the bleachers and then hitting another K-rail on the other side of the drag strip, and then kind of veering off to the right. It had the passenger side or driver's side tire was over the K-rail, and it kind of slid along the K-rail about 6 feet and then hooked the passenger side tire into Creighton's trailer and was sitting there burning the tires, and I caught it. Like was in, just right behind it and killed the switch and stop it from running. You know, out of breath.
Right.
Scared to death. Scared to death. Scared to death. I'm getting chills just thinking about those memories again. It was at that point, I hated that car. I dismantled that car. That's what happened to that car.
Okay.
It got completely torn apart. It turned into the car that Jack ran at KOH, OG13.
Okay.
Was 40% that car. All the power steering system, the brakes, the axle width wasn't right, but you know, most of the shit that was on the steering knuckles, you know, a lot of those components all went to Jack. And we tore it all down, and he chopped up the chassis. I got the motor. I gave the motor, I think Ed Webster had the motor. I give it to him. The Shortridge has the transmission. I think I have a water pump from that. But yeah, that was a disaster. I quit rock crawling at that point for a few years, or maybe until I got my next car after that was the Twisted Customs car, which was I think somewhere in 2007. So there was probably, I don't know, 9 months maybe with no car.
The Twisted car, you had a big motor in it.
Yes, sir. It was a 406 Chevy. It was a dart block built by, I'm not even going to mention their name because they were assholes, but it was a 17 grand in that motor build with a fast fuel injection, you know, some fancy race car parts in there. And it was set up as the old Chevy style, which was kind of a mistake on my part because the LS was out. And, you know, they do some bigger motors too, but it was right around the time where the production fuel injection was getting good and the aftermarket support was there. So it kind of was in the beginning. I don't want to take the credit for being the first guy, but, you know, I kind of had big, you know, some guys are putting big 454s in their stuff, but this is a big aluminum high horsepower small block, so it was pretty good. It was a lot of power, and it put it down to the ground.
I remember the smoke show that you did in Goldendale, Washington, and I was standing on a rock right above you. My feet were almost equal to the top of your cage.
Uh-huh.
And it was in one of those big crevasses between the big boulders up there. And there was a guy that had been out scouting locations for NASCAR when they wanted to put a NASCAR track up in the Pacific Northwest.
Uh-huh.
And he came out to the event, and he's standing on the rock with me, and you are just hammering that motor and trying to gain some traction. And, you know, you're kind of bouncing around in there and just, you know, tire smoke, the roar of that big motor. And the guy looks at me and goes, he was just so excited, like he was just totally on crank or something, you know, and he was just like spinning out of control. And he goes, "Oh my God, this is insane that, you know, you can do this kind of stuff and be so close to it." And he goes, if we get a track up here, can we build a man-made course? Can we do this? And I'm like, sure can. You know, of course they never built a track. You know, they didn't get that didn't go through, but that guy was so spun up.
Sold. Oh man.
Yeah, he was totally sold on the sport.
Well, you know, when them V8s, you get close enough to them and they rattle your chest.
Yes.
You know, that's one of the miraculous things. I mean, you go to the drag races or any high revving sport, that pressure that it creates in your chest is so, I don't know, for some of us it is. For other people, I guess it instills fear, but you know, that V8 rumbling feeling in your bones is something hard to deny, you know. Very true.
Yeah. So let's talk about the let's go back to the helmet thing.
All right. Okay, so Cougar Buttes. somewhere's in 2002, I'm gonna guess. Big Rich comes out with a freaking helmet law and said we got spotters now have to wear helmets. And I was adamant against that. I was, fuck, that's stupid, that's bullshit. And it got dropped on me last minute. I didn't know about it till we were at the event site. So out of this, from underneath the bench in the trailer or whatever, in Dustin's bin, he pulls out this dorkiest freaking helmet I've ever seen in my life. You know, it was, you know, I looked like an alien mushroom head or something. I don't know what it was, but it was this monstrosity helmet.
You were so mad before
I
that
was
event
pissed.
started that you had to wear a helmet.
Oh my God, I was angry as hell. I was on the verge of quitting, like, fuck it, I'm not doing this no more. But I was there. I put that helmet on, and you know, went on about the day, and I don't know, it must have been the second or third course after being so pissed off about the helmet. Dustin got hung up in something. I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention. I slipped and fell, and I shit you not, I fell backwards on like an 18-inch ledge and hit my fucking head right on the ledge. Right on the ledge. I mean, if I wasn't wearing that helmet that day at that time, I could have been killed or severely injured from falling and hitting my head on that, which I didn't fall a lot. It wasn't something that was common ground where I'd consider a helmet on my own, but I slipped and fell and hit my head, and it changed my entire outlook
On helmets.
on helmets.
I remember you coming to me right after that and saying thank you. Yeah. And I was like, for what? You know, because you were just pissing and moaning at me all morning long.
Yeah, I was angry, and I'm sorry, but that's Jody Everding way right there. Raising fucking hell, being a dumbass, and then instantly, bam, learn a fucking lesson. Nope, you're wrong, dumbass. And so yeah, helmet. I still don't like wearing one when I wheel, but I have one that I wear when I wheel.
That's good to hear.
So I have a giant headspace in my current crawler, but I still have I wear a Protect, kind of like the spotter helmet inside the car.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are you doing nowadays?
What am I doing? A little as possible nowadays. You know what I do for the most amount of fun is I'm back on a bicycle.
A bicycle, not a motorcycle, a bicycle.
No, bicycle, yeah. Yeah. Up until a few months ago, I left town. I went out of town. I went up to the ranch in Montana for a few months over the summertime. But prior to that, prior 6 months to that, I was riding my bike every day. Not every day, about 3 days a week, 4 days a week, about 20 to 25 to 30 miles a day.
Oh, so you're in shape.
Well, if you want to call this shape, yes. Yeah.
You know, round is a shape.
Round is.
That's what I've always told everybody. I'm in shape. I'm round.
my upper body is. I go to the gym pretty regularly. I go to the gym 3-4 days a week sometimes. I train with this guy that owns a gym, Boulevard Fitness down in San Diego. It was last year, or the year before last, it was the #1 gay gym in San Diego. But the owner is a friend of mine, and I get to go to the gym for free. So I go to that gym and I work out with my buddy. So yeah, I'm putting a little bit more time into self. You know, I just turned 55. So I'm trying to, I don't know. I still eat shitty sometimes and stuff, but I'm trying to do better for myself as I get older. And staying mobile is part of it, because pouring concrete forever, you crawl out of the bed and it takes you a couple of minutes to warm up to stand up straight. That ain't no good. So I'm working on my mobility, working on my strength, and occupying my time. My new wife is in tech. She works for a popular website. She's a software developer. And so that allows me to not have to take every job that comes my way. I can pick and choose a little bit better. And it allows me a little bit more time off, because it's not dire that I have to earn, because the household's not going to fail if I stop working, right?
Right.
So it gives me a little bit more freedom. And yeah, I bought the CJ back from Brian Crofts maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I put 40s on it. No, wait. Maybe it's closer to 12 years ago. Because 10 years ago, I was spotting, or 15, I did some work with Justin Common.
Right.
In 2015. So it's 2024. Yeah. I'm flying away, Rich. As we get older, man, it seems like it's gaining momentum.
Oh, yeah. It goes by much quicker.
Much quicker. So when I was competing with Justin Kyleman in 15, which Dustin referred me to Justin called me randomly and asked me if I'd be interested in spotting for him. And because I had spotted a rear steer car quite a bit with Dustin, I almost got first place internationally driving a rear steer car in Australia in 2005, was it?
Right.
A big year. 2006, I raced with Pirate4x4.com in the Baja 1000.
Yep.
Remember that with Mike Schaefer, Bob, Eric,
Lance. Yep.
Yeah, I was supposed to go down as the driver of record in that. Lance knows it. I believe he went down as driver of record. That's why he's got all that awesome BFG shit all over his stuff. We were in his house up in what is that little neighborhood he used to live in up there between the Rubicon and Georgetown? Quintet. We lived up there. We were at that house. We drew out of a hat. We chopped up the names and put them in a hat. I drew it once, pulled it out. It said I was the driver of record. They threw it. Oh no, that can't be. They're never going to go for this. That's not going to work out. They put it back in the hat. I drew another number and got driver of record. And I was supposed to be driver of record, but apparently, the bullshit story they told me is that they wouldn't go for it because I was a pro comp driver. That was the story.
Ah.
I think they just boned me out of it. Knowing these guys as well as I do now, I'm sure they just boned me. But that Baja experience was fantastic too. That was a mind blower when I was driving on my way to or from an event. Sarah was in the truck with me. They called up, and it was Lance and Camo were on the phone together talking to me and asked me if I would drive with them in the Baja 1000 in Schaefer's Jeep Speed. And I was blown away. I was blown away that they had called up and asked me. It was a big deal.
Right.
And so we did, and I picked Jeff Mello as my spotter, co-driver. And I'm going to tell this funny story. He couldn't pee in his catheter condom. We got in the car
he couldn't relax enough, huh?
He couldn't relax enough to pee. We got in the car in San Ignacio and took off at dark. And rips through the morning all the way. He held it until Laredo. We come across this mountain, and there's a valley in there. It's just goose egg boulders everywhere. It's just vibrating, and all the while he couldn't pee. I'm like, man, just let it go. Just let it go. And he couldn't do it. He's like, oh, this is killing me. His bladder's just in there bouncing around, just burning. And we crashed this hill into Laredo, and he sees all that water looking over the bay. I don't know what you call it. He sees all that water, and he's like, "Oh my God, I think I can let it go." He finally peed with the ocean there, and that was 3 hours, 4 hours into the ride. I guess it was pretty tough for him. He also gave me a great compliment at that time that he wanted to get in the driver's seat real bad. And he was waiting for driver's fade. That's what he called it. He's all, "You didn't fade at all. You were as sharp now as you were when you got in the seat." Oh, well, thanks.
That's awesome.
Some good times. Some good times.
Yeah.
I love that guy. I don't think he loves me, but I love that guy. I hold him on a high standard. So. Anyway, Baja 1000, Australia. You know, I got second internationally in Australia because of your boy there, Little Rich. Some cockamamie call, breaking the plane, some malarkey. I don't know. I don't buy it. I lost to Becca. Becca got first internationally by like 3 points in a drag axle with no rear steer. I had that car they built for me down there. Those Aussie boys toys.
That's right.
Yeah, they built a V8 similar to Christine vehicle. I didn't have to straddle the transmission as much. Rear steer long. It caught on fire like on the first course, and Rich sprayed that fire extinguisher in my face. It's amazing how much air those fire extinguishers take out of your lungs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was hard to breathe. Fire went out. Apparently there was a spot in the back of the motor with oil leaking out of it or something. But those guys, I had a full pit crew. I was a rock star down there. It was fantastic that, you know, at that event, they had that same photo from SEMA in the bubble gum and Christine. They had that picture on the newspaper in the local paper down there. Some gal come up to me and goes, "Hey, is this you?" And shows me the local paper. And there I was, the SEMA show picture in the local newspaper in Australia. Nice. And I was like, "Yeah, that is me." I took that paper from her. I was showing a bunch of heads. I'm all, "Look at here." You know, it was pretty cool. That was a good time in Australia. You were down there, right?
No, I backed out and didn't go down at the last minute.
Oh, I almost didn't get to go. I was trying to get a visa, and I put in for a business visa, which was a mistake. You know, because I thought, you know, I'm going down there. I had a bunch of shit sent down there. I did a business visa, and like days before I was supposed to fly out, the lady told me, "Well, Mr. Everding, we're sorry. After gathering up all this information and stuff, my FBI background check, you know, all kinds of crazy shit. And I turned it all into the embassy in Washington, and they told me, no, we're going to deny you." I was at work that day talking to them on my phone. And I said, "No, that's a bunch of bullshit." I said, "It's a crying shame. I'm going to have to tell my sponsors that have spent thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars to get me down there to drive a vehicle, because I was honest with you folks about a business, because I was going down there as a driver instead of a private or just a regular visa. I could have just lied. Oh yeah, I'm just going for a vacation," and never said a word. And I had my visa weeks ago, and yet at the last minute you're going to cancel me just because you don't think I'm passing the character test. And then it goes, "Well, Mr. Everding, we're going to let you go now." And they gave me my visa and shipped it to me. And it came in like the day before I left for Australia. Wow. Which was a 14-hour flight. You fly for, you know, 7.5 hours, and you look out the window and there's just water, maybe a boat.
If you're lucky, there's a boat.
Maybe a boat. And you're like, well, if we go down now, we're fucked. We're drowning for a day, whatever. So it was crazy, but it was a good time. Real good time down there. Jack went, Sarah went with us. We stayed in some fancy hotel in town and went up to the rock crawling site. They got us our own house up in I think it was the Blue Mountains in Australia. I don't know. Good times though. Car was cool. I just saw some pictures on the internet of it not that long ago. Rear steer cars. So I had a penalty back then.
Right.
For rear steer, and still lost to Becca by 3 points because of breaking the plane with the top of the tire over the cone call. You couldn't even prove it with a replay or nothing.
Nope, because we don't allow the photographs or video replay. Nope.
Yeah.
The call is the call.
The call is the call. Yeah. So,
I'm sure Little Rich just wanted
please.
Becca to win.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what it was. He was in their pocket back then, Everybody wanted Red Bull to win. It was good for the sport when those big names brought home big trophies. Anyway, good times though.
So you're still wheeling?
Thank you very much. Yeah, some.
Okay, good.
I did. I got some championships spotting with Dustin. I got a championship driving my own car in 05. I got to go to Australia, second internationally. I got to race in the Baja 1000 with Pirate4x4.com and all those big hoo-ha's over there. I have a first place trophy, a Baja 1000 trophy in my living room.
That's awesome.
It is. Somewhere around, I got the Twisted Custom car after that, and that was pretty good for a while. But my marriage and my life started dwindling. Some of my old bullshit started coming back, and I kind of threw all the good stuff away. It seemed like, yeah. And that was kind of the end of it around 2007, 2008. Struggling with the King of the Hammers, trying to make a go slow car go fast. I was pissed off for a while at Jeff Knoll because he turned the competitor, which in my era was the guy that got everything for free from the sponsors. We got a lot of good free shit, tires and axles and transfer cases and fire extinguishers and winch rope and everything we needed to rock crawl. We were the competitors had it pretty good. They were getting a lot of good product, even starting to get some monetary assistance. And then along comes Dave Cole and Jeff Knoll throwing us into the ring with all the desert racers. And now we got to start buying radios and Parker pumps and fire suits and helmets and more stuff for our cars. And trying to switch the Twisted car from a rock crawler with a 5-gallon tank to a desert car with a 30-gallon tank between a rock crawl and then now we're going to go fast and then go back to the rock crawl. It was kind of burning the candle at both ends for me.
Right.
And I couldn't keep up with between pouring concrete full blast, working on the car full blast, which I didn't have like a pit crew. I didn't have a crew that come to my house. I didn't have a Rage Fourth. I didn't have a team.
Right.
I had some help a little bit, but not usually at the last minute, to jam out some stuff. There's been times where we'd worked on the car in the pits to get it ready for the races at AOH. And that was tough. That just broke my car all up. Maybe racing against the clock for me wasn't a good match.
Right. No, that happened to a lot.
I get race mode and I get to going, man. And you know, I can preserve the car some, but apparently I couldn't do it real well because I had 2, maybe 3 DNFs and KOH from that. And then the breaking point for me with that was we came home from, I think 2009 was my last race. Sarah was my co-pilot. We had a pretty good run. We were running out and back, and we were just about ready to head it back to Hammertown. This is before like a remote pit came above, I think, and we were somewhere out in Aftershock heading northbound, I think, and I ripped out a drive line and wired it back in, but somewhere, and we wired it back in and we got back into camp. But after further inspection, the driveline spit because I'd cracked the bell housing on the tranny, which was a thing for those twisted cars. They'd cracked bell housings, I'd heard. And so I had to be the TDS. I think it was like the following weekend, you know, sponsorship commitment plus, you know, being at the big events is part of our circus show.
Right.
And we'd compete and we'd go to these large events and have the vehicle there, park it in a booth, and, you know, stand around and hoop and haul or talk our asses off and drink a bunch of beer or whatever. You know, it was part of the gig. So I said, all right, no problem. I'll pull the transfer case and tranny and I'll put a super bell on it. I should be able to fix this, no problem. Because I had TCI was sponsoring me. Transmission, TCI, they're in any Jag or Summit. You know, they're a pretty big transmission company. And they were sponsoring me. So I got the super bell put on there behind that dart block, and on the super bell, the lip of the bell housing around the outside is probably 3 times the thickness of what a standard turbo 350 is. The lip is just, you know, 1/4 inch with some flared out for the bolts to go through or whatnot. Well, on the back of the dart block, there's some threaded ports where freeze plugs would normally be on the back of a Chevy 350, and some little like 1/2 inch oil lines. Well, the threaded in plug wasn't flush mounted. It protruded out of the back of the motor beyond the milling of the back of the motor. So it protruded out just enough for the fatter bell housing lip on the super bell. And I know you're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to crank that together with the bolts. But I cranked it together with the bolt because it was just that one spot where it wasn't pushing in. So I sucked it together. And when I sucked it together, it broke the threaded plug in the back of the aluminum block, which was in an oil journal. There's some sort of little oil pressure spring pin that controls the amount of oil that goes into the cylinder heads there, and slapped it back together. And when I started it up to put it on the trailer the night before TDS, she just pumped all that oil right all over the floor underneath the lift. And I was done. I had a session there where I was just flabbergasted with the work I had just cranked out over the 3 days. And
all for naught.
All for naught, just to break that one bolt and spew a giant puddle of oil on the ground. And it just, I didn't touch the car I cleaned up the oil. I didn't touch the car for probably a month. I was just broke. It was like the straw that broke the camel's back. There's a million other issues going on in my life, and that one was fighting me the hardest. And that broke it for a while, and I pulled the motor in and it stayed out for a long time after that. And that was somewhere in 2007, right as the 2008 the recession hit. And that's when I started having troubles with my wife. ex-wife now, and it all just kind of went in the toilet from there. And that was the end of my rock crawling, driving career, after that.
That recession was hard on a lot of people.
It was. And we had an enclosed trailer, Rhino, to run around from the pit car, tools. It was like a little chase truck, toolbox in the back of it, coolers, radios, uniforms. We were pretty on fire for a little while, and then it kind of faded. Broken mental issue, I guess. I don't know.
It all attributes.
Yeah. And then so that was pretty much it for a while. Sarah and I got a divorce. She took the twisted car. I kept the motor and the transmission. She sold the twisted car, which had some really cool parts on it. It had the very first Spider Tracks knuckle, the fabricated knuckle and C's on it. They were stamped 0001.
Wow.
On them. And it was the first of the production models. They've changed them since then, but unibearings, the fabricated Spider Tracks. I bent the housings. I still have them. I bent them at the Rubicon that year. They rolled it on Ice House Road doing something or another at speed. And ended up, I don't know, that's a story for another time, I guess. Bent those housings, and they helped me out, gave me some new housings. And it was supposed to be the thick tube, but they like to give out the thin tubes over there. And then Sarah sold that car to Tim Florian.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And Tim Florian had that car. He raced it at KOH once, I think. And I don't know if he competed it in any rock crawling events or not, but his future was limited also.
Right.
After that, he rests in peace.
Yeah, he had some demons.
Yeah. And I think I tried to buy that car back. I went up there and looked at it and talked to Tim's wife at the time, but their number was high. I don't know what Sarah got for it. I think she got like 19,000 or something for it at the time. And I don't know what Tim paid for it, but they were trying to get 12 or 13 out of it when I looked at it. And when I looked at it, it was tore up. It was just a big pile of parts, a lot of broken tube. Still had those good axles underneath there though that I was trying to get back. But I think it ended up, I don't know for sure, but I think that car belongs to Jack from CTM and my ex-wife, who are now married.
Right.
And so I think they bought it. I think.
Got it back. Okay.
Sarah competed in a women's competition, and Jack spotted I had a broken leg, a broken ankle from partying up in Sacramento at fucking Hollywood's house. I picked up, what was that guy's name? I don't know. I picked up some guy I was fighting with, arguing with. Something Billy.
Billy Bob?
Billy Bob. Yeah.
Whitaker.
Yeah. We were in Hollywood's driveway, slanted, big party at Hollywood's. Billy Bob was talking shit. I'm an honorary part of the Rubicon. Me, Dale,
Schaefer,
and Chris Durham. I think they're the only 4 honorary pirates. Anyway, we were at a pirate party. We were fighting. I was arguing with Billy Bob. and I threw him over my shoulder, and I was standing there in that on that slanted driveway at Hollywood's, and rolled my ankle in the driveway and broke it, and I flew home in a wheelchair.
Oh.
Drunken party. Something.
So you're
So Jack spotted for Sarah. She drove the twisted car and got third place. She could have got first if they'd have listened to me. They didn't. but they got third. So maybe that's their romantic time car or whatever. Now they own that car, I think now. So okay. Good for them.
So over time are you back sober now?
Yes.
And you're riding bike, getting in back into shape, and working when you want to.
Yeah.
Perfect. So it sounds like you got your proverbial shit together.
Well, yes. As an older Jody, my shit is better together than it was in the past. I mean, there's been some good times. There's been some burning the candles at both ends, but I'm only burning it at one end now.
There you go.
I like going a little bit slower, not making such quick decisions. I'm not randomly deciding to pick up my homeboy in Mexico and loading an airplane on the trailer and dragging it home.
I had forgotten that event. It had skipped my mind. I remember. Oh God, what a trip that was. When you and I was driving and Camo was in the truck, and we were coming back from downtown, going out to wherever we were camped out, and the light kept staying on in the truck.
Yeah.
And we got pulled over by the local San Felipe police for eye pollution, and we were in that Nissan pickup, and I was trying to get there was a rope holding the running board on, and I couldn't get the door closed, and so the tailgate light was on, and you were asking the cops how much to, how much do we have to pay to get out of this?
Yeah.
And I just kept trying to slam the door. Finally, I slammed the door hard enough to where the light went out. And I said, okay, no more eye pollution, just jumped in and we drove off. And the cops were standing there like, what the hell just happened? That was a trip for the ages. I interview Camo tomorrow.
Oh, fantastic.
So
I think he still has contact with those people with the airplane.
I believe so.
Airplane story was that was a good one. Remember?
Oh yeah.
Did all that shit. I go down there under the pretense of putting Bob's XJ on my trailer and bringing it back across the border. And I pull into Pete's camp, where you guys were all at, drinking there at Pete's camp in San Felipe. I show up after a 5-hour drive, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? You're all sitting around the table. Here comes some shots my way, and they're like, how'd you feel about rescuing an airplane? And I look around at Camo and you and Bob, and there's that couple there looking at us, big puppy dog eyes. And I'm like, yeah, what the hell? Let's do it. Sounds like a challenge accepted to me, right?
Oh, and it was.
What a fiasco that was. Trailering an airplane out of that.
Over the border and through customs. I mean, I don't think it's ever been done before.
And then all the way back to their place, close to where I live now. I live in Valley Center, which is close to Fallbrook or wherever it was those folks lived. And then the funniest part was we get in there and we're at their house. We've dropped off the airplane at the hangar. We've unloaded it. We're back at their house a few miles from the airfield where they store their plane. And all over the house on the back door is all these Sierra Club fucking stickers.
Yeah.
And shit. And we're out back smoking. And they come back in and are you a member of the Sierra Club? And they just like, they bow their heads and say yes. And I'm like, wow, what a trip. I guess all off-roaders aren't that bad after all, are we?
Nope, they
And,
agreed to that beforehand even.
yeah. But I remember I was kind of getting that idea about them when they were in the back of my truck. We were coming across the border, but it was crazy. That was a pretty big feather in our hat at that time.
Yep. Well, Jody,
Yep.
I want to say thank you so much for spending the morning and talking with me and exploring your history and some of your wild times, and I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share some story with you, Rich. Make me look good, buddy.
Absolutely.
All right, I love you. I appreciate the times.
All right, buddy. You take care.
Talk to you. All right.
Bye. Well, that's another episode of Conversations with Big Rich. I'd like to thank you all for listening. If you could do us a favor and leave us a review on any podcast service that you happen to be listening on, or send us an email or a text message or a Facebook message, and let me know any ideas that you have, or if there's anybody that you have that you think would be a great guest, please forward the contact information to me so that we can try to get them on. And always remember, live life to the fullest. Enjoying life is a must. Follow your dreams and live life with all the gusto you can. Thank you.